Okay.
Good afternoon, Don and fellow classmates. My name is Eric. Me and my groupmate would like to present a topic that humans have long been familiar with, and that induced fear in all of us, and that is pain. Pain is understood that as a feeling, but have you ever thought about how do we feel pain, and what are the mechanisms behind analgesic and anesthetic? Today, in the following 15 minutes, we would like to extend your knowledge on this by discussing two main fields. First, Don would like to talk about the physiology behind pain. After that, Bank and Isindu would like to talk about the pain management. Now I would like to pass it to Don and explain how our bodies feel pain.
Thank you, Eric. I'm sure all of us aspiring doctors are very interested in how our body functions. Well, today I'm going to describe how we feel pain in our bodies. First of all, before we feel pain, there must be a stimuli that we feel that causes us this pain. Well, this stimuli is detected by our special pain receptors and our nerve endings called nociceptors. And in response to this stimuli, the nociceptors will produce an action potential, or better known as a nerve impulse, that will travel along the afferent pain fiber. And upon reaching the central nervous system, the afferent pain fiber will form a synapse, which is a gap junction between two neurons. And at the synapse, there will be a release of neurotransmitters, for example, glutamate. And these neurotransmitters will act as chemical messengers, which will transmit the nerve impulse to the following neuron. And following that, the nerve impulse will travel to the spinal cord and also the brain. At the spinal cord, they will undergo processing, and the nerve impulse will follow a neural pathway back to the original place of pain. And this allows a mechanical action of probably, let's say, moving your hand away from a hot fire. And this is what we call a reflex. Besides that, nerve impulses also travel up to the brain. This allows the brain to keep an archive of painful experiences that we may have, and also allows us to generate emotions in response to the pain, like sometimes how we cry, or sometimes how we feel scared of certain things that cause us pain. And it is this fear that in the past has made people reluctant to undergo medical treatment because of the painful procedures that they went to undergo. But in recent years, humans have created several different ways of managing this pain effectively. And my colleague Bang will discuss one of them, which is anesthesia.
Anesthesia is a substance that causes lack of feeling or awareness. There are four types of anesthesia. The first type is called the local anesthesia, which is numbing a small part of the body. And the second type is called the general anesthesia. The general anesthesia is numbing the whole body and causing the patient to become unconscious. The third type is called the regional anesthesia. Regional anesthesia is blocking the pain at a certain region of the body, such as epidural anesthesia, where it is injected through the spinal cord during childbirth. And the last type of anesthesia is called the intravenous sedation. This is a mild sedation and combining with pain medicine. Now that I have talked about the types of anesthesia, I would like to focus more into the functioning mechanism of the general anesthesia. Scientists today cannot really explain how does the general anesthesia work, but they have a general idea that it works in the central nerve system, where it temporarily inhibits the synaptic transmission. To explain this process, scientists have came up with two theories. The first theory is called the non-specific theory, where the general anesthesia temporarily prevents depolarization of the postsynaptic neuron, causing the nerve impulse cannot be passed through. And the second theory is called the dual dual process model, which there's two steps in the model. The first is that it inhibits the excitatory neurotransmitters such as acetylcholine or glutamate. And the second step is it enhances the inhibitory neuron such as GABA or glycerin. Now that you have general understanding of the type of anesthesia and one of the functions of the anesthesia, I would like to give a brief history on anesthesia. Anesthesia was first used in 1842 by Dr. Crawford Williamson Long. He used diethyl ether on a surgical patient. Although it was a successful surgery, it wasn't first recorded until 1846, who a dentist named William T.G. Morton uses ether to remove a vascular tumor from a patient's jaw. And one of the famous use of anesthesia was in 1855 by Dr. James Simpson, who used chloroform on Queen Victoria during labor. Yeah. And now that I have talked about one of the pain management, I would like to pass on to Iskander, who will talk about another type of pain management.
Thank you very much, Ben. Good afternoon. My name is Iskander, and today I'll be talking to you about analgesics. So basically, an analgesic is a chemical substance which eliminates the sensation of pain, but instead of creating a lack of feeling or numbness, analgesics do not reduce the patient's awareness. And this is really important because it is believed that anesthetics might degenerate your brain cells. So basically, like for example, like if a woman goes into labor, it is much more safer to register analgesics into her body instead of local anesthetics, just for the safety of the pregnant woman. So now I'll just go on and give a brief history on analgesics. The origin of the word comes from the word an and algos, which means without pain. And the ancient Greeks, they used to chew herbal leaves, which offer pain-killing properties. But it was only in 1853 when Mr. Gerhardt synthesized the first synthetic analgesic, which was acetylsalicylic acid. So now I will explain to you the types. I'll list you the types of analgesics, and I will explain how a particular analgesic works in your body. So basically there are a number of analgesics. Just to name a few, there are paracetamol, COX-2 inhibitors, and SAIDs, but today I will be just focusing on opiate analgesics. And in this particular category, there's still even more types of opiate analgesics, and there are three. One is opioid, the other is non-opioid, and the other is co-analgesics. So the opioid analgesics, which I will abbreviate as OA. So basically the OA affects the central nervous system, which is your brain and your spinal cord. And one example of opioid analgesics is morphine. Non-opioids affect the injured site, or it's usually the peripheral nervous system, which is basically your limbs, your hands and your feet. And one example of this is aspirin. And co-analgesics they're not really analgesics, they just function like they do because they interrupt your nervous impulse towards the brain. And example of these substances are antidepressants and anti-epileptic medicine. So now I will go on to explain how opioid analgesics work. For example, like morphine. So basically, on your synapse, you will have a G receptor. You will have opioid receptor, and the opioids, the OA, the opioid analgesics, will basically bind to the G protein of these receptors, and this will interrupt the calcium channels, which decrease the effectiveness of the neurotransmitters to transfer impulses towards your brain. And by doing this, it will prevent the nerves to send information towards your brain, which controls how much pain you feel. And these chemicals are you need to weigh the individual before you registering these analgesics, because the body weight is, you need to register more analgesics to bigger people. And so the body eliminates these opioids by a process called biotransformation, which happens in the liver, and this is an enzymatic process which breaks down the OAs. And yeah, that's about it. So I will now give it over to Eric, who will conclude our presentation.
Yeah, from my colleagues' explanations, it shows that humans have been utilized their intelligence and manufactured two innovations. For those innovations, it allowed us to manage pain effectively, and it also enabled doctors and others in medical profession to have other medical treatments such as surgery or cure pain from migraines or wounds through the advancements in science leading to these innovations, and we have concluded pain. And this is the end of our presentation, and the floor is open for the questions.
Okay, do you have any questions? I've got lots of questions. I would like to ask so can you explain opioid again?
What they are?
Yes.
Basically the opioid analgesics, they affect the central nervous system.
Right. How?
How? Basically they bind to a certain receptor which is called the opiate receptor, and it interrupts the channels, the calcium channels in the which governs the electric impulse which is sent through the spinal.
So what does that mean?
It interrupts the transmission of nerve impulses to the brain.
Right.
Yeah. So the brain cannot transmit signals to tell the body that it's feeling pain.
So it doesn't feel the pain?
It does not.
Right, okay. Could you explain as well what, could you explain glutamate?
Glutamate is
It's a kind of like excitatory neuron that like pass nerve impulse from the synapse to the synaptic cleft.
it's sort of, the nerve impulse is contained as chemicals in this neurotransmitter called glutamate.
Right.
Yeah. So it's the nerve impulse in a chemical form.
Right, okay. And you talked about pain fibres as well. Could you explain those again?
Well, they're actually nerve fibers,
Right.
but they transmit nerve impulses that signal pain.
That signal pain, and so they're specific to pain.
Yeah.
Right.
Because they lead to the pain receptors.
And where do we have those?
And all your nerve endings.
All our nerve endings.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Yep, Paris?
Somebody talked about the history, and you mentioned the name Dr. Crawford or something.
Dr. Crawford Williamson.
Yeah.
Yeah, could you just briefly state what he did?
Yeah, he's an American doctor who first like operated on a surgical patient.
And he used ether.
Yeah.
Right.
Diethyl ether. But it was like, as you see that they like later they changed to chloroform and other type of anesthetic, because like diethyl ether have flammable and explosive
Yes.
properties. Yeah. And
So it
also
wasn't
make the
safe.
patient- Yeah. So throughout the history line, anesthetic is constantly changed to find like better resulting. Yeah.
Right,
results.
right. Because chloroform is what, essentially?
You might put you to sleep for a while.
Yes, for a long time. Okay. Right. Great. Thanks very much then, guys.